going on, everybody? I want to do a crazy hard hat hair electrician talk for you all today about underground and tips that are helpful for underground. As many of you know, electrical has like many different sort of ways that you can do the same thing. You know, you get wire from point A to point B, but there's many different ways to do that. And when there's no concrete laid, there's no foundation to the building, by and large. If you're just dealing with like a bunch of steel beams holding up like a corrugated structure that's going to get concrete on top of it, and then they're going to do the foundation, like the concrete floor later, you know, you have a lot of time to get in there with PVC and not have to like support anything. You know, all you have to do is just move the earth to make space for those conduits. So so just like kind of some things to think about, like tips or like ways to frame your mind for it. So like if you're in like a commercial space and you're going to be mounting a box, you know, you'd be like, okay, well, you know, I need to think about all these different things, like can I support the thing that I'm running? How am I going to do that? And so like that's like something that you have to think about. And a lot of times in that case, it's like, okay, I could run it along this stud face or the face of this wall, or I could suspend it from a rack from dropping all thread for it. But with underground, instead, it's like, okay, so we know where all these pipes are stubbing up, and we just need to figure out where that is. And there's not really any walls. It's not as square of a structure that you can get measurements off of like you would be in a somewhat finished or at least like framed building. Like there's only a few framing members that like exist that you can pull measurements off of. And so that's like something to consider, is like, how the hell do you get measurements off of anything? And and that's a great question. So if there's no walls and there's only a few beams, a lot of blueprints will outline for you like measurements off of beams. So they'll create like a little battleship grid, and like a beam will land and it'll have like a coordinate for it. So it'll be like A3 or A15 or A, depending on like what part of the grid you're at, or it'll be like F22 or something, and that'll give you a coordinate for a beam. And then you can go off of, and this is what a lot of people do, is they'll wrap a string around two like lined up beams, and then they'll take the center of that, because it's very easy to pull a tension point to the center when you just wrap around a beam, and you'll just pull the tension tight and keep the string line in the middle between the 2 points of the like steel that's up there that you're using to get your measurement off of. So string is something that you're going to need a lot of if you do underground, especially if there's no walls and there's just like a few steel members that are supporting the roof, and that's going to be your frame of reference point. So measurements are going to need to be pulled off of center of those beams. If you could probably do off the edge of certain beams, but honestly, it would probably be easier for you if you just took center, because it'd be much easier to wrap a string around and do it that way, rather than having to like find a way to pull tension and do it around the edge. I guess you could also do that too, but in my opinion, it's just a little bit easier to go off center. So at least that's how I've been taught in the way that I do it. So it's like the measurements will be taken off of the plans for your power and your lighting detail and all these different things, and you'll look at like what is expected of that area for which conduits need to go where in this pre-plan, and you'll be able to get measurements off of those framing members. So that's one thing to consider. And then another thing is that, like, how do I support something that where there's no ground or framing member that I can drill into? So then that kind of lends it to another tool that you use a lot when you are doing underground, which is either a roto hammer or a sledgehammer. And they sort of go hand in hand, because there's spots where you could physically like drill into concrete. So like there's certain pads where you could drill into concrete. So it's like, okay, I need a roto hammer, and I can also use a roto hammer, especially an SDS Max, the big roto hammer, for digging. And so that's kind of nice, so that you can actually, like chunk out huge little pieces of dirt, or huge pieces of dirt, and not have to break your back digging all the time. So like a sledgehammer is also something that I mentioned, and a sledgehammer is really good because if you want to support a conduit rack, how do you do it if you're just in a dirt patch? So just because of the like Venn diagram of materials that we have around, a lot of times people will simply use EMT as a stake in the ground. They won't really, you'll see it. They'll have like the concrete form guys stakes that have the holes in them, or like people will slam rebar into the ground. But as electricians, EMT conduit is like a very common material that you have on site. And so it just sort of is a crossover that people will tend to do that. So let's say you have a stub up for a panel, right? And there's like a bunch of 1-inch conduits that go into the bottom of this panel, and you need to create a rack for that. So like certain things to consider is like, okay, where's grade? And a lot of times electricians don't have this tool. In my opinion, there might be 1 or 2 on your site, if you're lucky. Otherwise, I don't know why it's so common, but electricians a lot of times will just borrow the Stabila like plane. I don't know exactly the name of it. It's like it shoots out a transmitter signal at a set height, and you have an adjustable height like receiver that will ring out when it's in the same plane as the other as the transmitter. So it'll give you common reference points. It's like the Stabila. I don't exactly know the name of it, to be completely honest with you, but it's like it's just a transmitter and a receiver that allows you to get elevations. And so that's like a very common thing that you'll use, and you can use that to get like idea of where grade is. And then you can be like, okay, well, we might not need our rack to be sticking out because there's going to be a panel that goes right above this. But so you're like, okay, well, maybe we could just have the rack like built in the ground, and then we'll just like do a strut strap onto the strut rack, and then the conduits will just stub up. And that's cool. I've seen people do that. I feel like a lot of times your stuff gets ran over more. A lot of the times in what I've seen is that a lot of people will do very tall racks and very tall conduits, and that might seem like you're wasting material, because you're like, okay, well, the conduits are only going to come out 2 inches out of grade. Like, what is the deal with that? And I would just say to you that, like, if you're in an underground job, there is so much groundwork going on between trenching equipment and excavators and just like backhoes and all these other like heavy equipment that's just rolling around, and trenches are just popping up left and right and center of you. And so like the amount of times when you'll be like, oh, this area looks like a good place to set up, and then the next day it's has like a 6-foot trench dug underneath it, and there's pounds and pounds and piles of dirt next to that trench, and you're like, okay, well, the things change very quickly in underground. The earth will get compacted, or like backfilled and compacted very quickly, and so like it's very simple for things to get broken, or conduits to get ripped out of the ground, or for things to get ran over. So my point in saying this is just that like it makes sense to make tall racks sometimes. It's definitely something that I'd recommend, that if you're on a new build, like from the ground up job, and you're doing a lot of underground, that's something that you consider to be like, hey, foreman, like I was thinking about doing racks that are like 5 feet tall, and like maybe spray paint them orange so that they don't ever get ran over. And they're like, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Like, depends. Like, some people are gonna be like, well, why would you use a whole 10-foot stick of strut when our conduits are only going to come out a few inches out of the ground. So it just kind of depends. If there's a lot of work going on and that's a concern and something that you think is important to consider, like don't skimp out on some extra material, because you might end up having to redo the whole rack because it got ran over by an excavator or something. Like there's some careless stuff that happens on site. So just something to consider. So you could build the rack. This is what I was started to talk about here. You can build the rack. So how do you build the rack on a bare earth? So you can pound in with a sledgehammer a piece of EMT into the earth, and EMT is pretty nice with that. It makes it pretty easy to embed into the earth because it's hollow out in the middle, which makes it like if it encounters a rock, it's not going to be like some rocks might just go straight up the pipe, and it actually makes it for a more solid, because it's only like an eighth of an inch diameter or eighth of an inch walls in the thing, so you only need to go put that much material in as opposed to a whole fucking half-inch stick of rebar or something. So a lot of times you'll pound in stakes of EMT, and then you'll either tie wire, which is another thing you'll use a lot of when you do underground, or you'll do strut straps. So you could do, you say you pound those 1 inch or 3/4 inch stakes of EMT into the earth, and then you're like, okay, so now how do we attach this to the rack that's going to support the conduits that we want to stub up here? And then you're going to do like a number of things. You could either orient the strut so that like you have like the C, this opening of the C of the channel of the strut facing like out, so that you could like do you could either point that towards the conduit that you just staked in the earth, so that you could have like a horizontal piece and strut strap it to that. I feel like that's a lot of extra work, and so a lot of people will do tie wire. They'll face the C channel strut away from the conduit, and then they'll just put a piece of tie wire around the conduit and then around the strut, and then they'll do it in multiple spots so that it makes a semi-rigid, strut rack. So like you'll do like 2 stakes. You'll do it at 2 points where the strut comes up, the vertical portions of the strut, and you'll have those as like backing that stake it and embedded in the earth and make it semi-rigid. So that's like a way that I've done that. If you are in a situation where you're on a pad, it's different. You could use wedge anchors or tapcons and use an L bracket, like a 2-hole L bracket, and then just, have your embedded in the concrete tapcon or wedge anchor, what have you, and then have a spring nut attached to the foot of a strut rack leg, So that's like an example of like something to keep in mind. Of like, okay, well, if we're gonna build a rack, like how are we gonna do this? We're gonna need to stake it in the earth using EMT and tie wire, and then we're also gonna, once we put up our conduits, like how are we gonna do this? Do we want to do a rigid 90 because we have a concern about jet line or rope cutting in the 90? I don't know if that's ever happened to you before, but if you've ever done underground before, it's not uncommon that how rope burn happens on your hands. Rope burn happens to the edge of the 90 very frequently. You're like, let's say you have a U-shape conduit run for underground. You're just basically sawing into a PVC 90 when you are pulling on the wire pole. So just like something to think about, like you'll blow jet line string, and jet line string cuts, like it gets hot and it can make abrasion on the inside of the pipe and it can cut it, so that's not good. So rigid 90s are a consideration. So that's just something to consider. So something else that I'd recommend is duct tape is your best friend while you are working in underground, because duct tape allows you to tape up your ends. So, working in you're on a very dusty new job site, and all this earth is being moved around you. Dust is going to be blowing everywhere. It's going to be very easy for you to get dirt in your conduits. And if you've ever, done a wire pull before, you know how crazy hard some conduit pulls can end up being. And so that's just something to consider. So tape up, like let's say you got a 60-foot trench, and then it, does a kick sort of off in one angle, and then you 90 up to a rack. That is an example of how your trench might be. So if that's the case, you're like, okay, well, it's 60-foot run. I could probably prefab some sticks of conduit, glue them all together, and get all that, prepped, because that's just going to be, I could just throw it in there. I don't want to be getting up and out of the trench and doing one stick and then get out the trench, grab another piece of conduit, and then repeat that, prefab, make it easier on your body and stuff, and just work smart. So like you could do like 6 sticks, maybe you could do 5 sticks, because you might have to sweep the corners of where the direction changes in the trench. So you could glue all those together, but while you're gluing them, it's very easy for dirt to get inside of the pipe. So like tape up one end, shake out all the dirt that may be in the conduit, and then take the piece that you're about to glue, tape up the further end just so that no dirt gets in there, and then glue the pieces together, and then you have a clean pipe. And so that's like something that you could do to make sure that you don't get any dirt in your pipe, because it might seem like you're wasting time, but like if there is a rock in your conduit, like it could literally like make the pull impossible, and you might have to abandon a conduit. So like it's very easy to just be like, oh, just stick and glue. Like, don't worry about it. Like, there's a lot of guys that do that, and it's really annoying because they think that it makes sense, and then lo and behold, it does matter, because there's a crap ton of dirt. And to what some people might say to that, you could be like, oh, I could just blow it out with an air compressor. And that's true, but it's a good practice to like not wedge a huge rock inside of a conduit, because like anything can happen. So don't like set yourself up for failure. Be smart about how you prep your stuff. And duct tape is your best friend. After you do stub ups, like let's say you know where a rack is, but you don't have the trench built yet, the trench dug out yet or excavated, tape up the bottom of the 90, tape up the top of the 90. It's a very dusty. I work in Arizona, so it's like, a very dusty climate. It's a desert. So just something to consider. Duct tape is your best friend. Another thing. Also, what else would be really good? Tie wire. A trick with tie wire is double wrapping it. If you've ever been in a situation where you go and try to use tie wire, there's a certain tension point where it just snaps. And so if you just do one piece of tie wire wrapped around something, it's a good chance of when you get the tension like close to where everything is snug on the wrap, right, that it will just snap. So a lot of people will do this as electricians. I think it's somewhat a thing elsewhere, but you'll wrap around, like let's say there's a post or a pole or a fence or something, you'll wrap the tie wire around it. You'll like take the leading edge and you'll go around it, and then you'll have your little duct tape tie wire little wrap, and you'll just pull on both ends, allowing it to feed from the tie wire spool, and then pulling on the other end, the cut end side, and then you just take it all the way out. You take your half-inch drill, you put it into the chuck, you tighten it up, and then you have to get 2 pieces. So like you pull it to the length you want, right? I usually do it in really long stretches, like 50, 60 feet. And then you cut the end of the one part that's still on the spool, and then you just take your lineman and make like a little joint, like a little, like sprayed them together, and then make it like really fine at the head so that it goes into the chuck of your drill really, really easy. And then you can just going forward on your drill until it gets really fine and spun and braided. And then once you do that, you got a much stronger tie wire, and if one breaks while you're twisting it, you still got another piece that's still there to back you up. So it's like a time saver in a way. It's a much more strong way of using tie wire, because tie wire can be very flimsy. So just another trick for underground is doubling up your tie wire. Another thing I'd recommend about underground would just be like if you are working with like maybe consider asking for more like power tools to help you out with it. Like if you can ask work to be like, hey, there's like 6 guys here and you guys want us to dig a trench, but like it's the desert earth. Can we get another roto hammer, another bit? A lot of companies will have roto hammers, but they don't have the digging bit, and it's just so annoying. It's like, oh, we got this roto hammer, if only we could use it. So it's like, just like make sure management knows your needs and don't ever just take that upon yourself. Try to nag them, try to make them, it's their job, they should give you these tools. So yeah, like if like you need like concrete bits, or like you need like digging shovel bits or something like that, like just consider those things and make sure management knows. And it's very easy to run through material as well, so also making a list for management to order more stuff, or if there's a material like person that's in charge of the job that you're on, like make a mental note. You're like, wow, we ran like 600 feet of 1 inch, we probably don't have any 1 inch left. Like, so just like make a list of that. If you like ate through all the 90s, or you don't have any like 10 mil tape anymore because all of the rigid 90s got taped up or something, like just think ahead about material and what you're going to need. If like strut straps are got to run out because you had like 30 stub ups of like 1 inch, like you might need more strut straps. So just something to consider as well. So these are some tips I could recommend to people for working underground. And it's a little bit different of an animal than like new builds or remodels, commercial or residential. It's like a different animal. It's like the same sort of, you're getting wire from point A to point B, but it's like it's like a sort of a different sort of animal. And so some people can get tripped up by it. There's so many different ways that electrical takes shape, and so just gotta stay ahead of the game by knowing these tricks. And it's the same thing in a different form. So I hope you guys found this useful. Let me know if you guys have any like underground tips that really help you. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one.